if anybody wants any.
That was freshman Republican Madison Cawthorn taking action, something that doesn't normally happen in Washington, D.C. Someone sees a problem and then does something about it. He delivered pizzas to our National Guard that were kicked out of the Capitol and forced to take their breaks in a nearby cold garage in the middle of winter. Congressman Cawthorn is joining us now. Thank you so much for taking the time, Congressman.
Benny, it's great being on your show, brother. I got to tell you, thank you so much for shining light onto what happened in Washington, D.C. The powers that be, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and namely Joe Biden, allowing this to happen to our men and women who are serving our country is despicable.
Madison, I mean, the first and most natural question is, are you going to scare all the pizza delivery men in D.C. that you're going to take their jobs? I mean, you did an excellent job. How many pizzas did you deliver to the National Guard last night?
We delivered as much as you can carry in a Tacoma TRD. I've got to give a big shout out to Papa John's. Not that they did it as a partisan move, but they heard that our troops were in trouble, and they set everything aside to make all those pizzas for us.
What is it that, you did this instantly? It usually takes decades or lifetimes for someone to actually move in Washington, D.C. and do something. I think everyone got whiplash watching you just say, no, here's a problem, I'm going to go at it, and you did something about it. And it's really neat to see that. What was the reaction of our servicemen who had been treated like dogs, who had been treated so disrespectfully?
Well, you know what? As my chief of staff and I were driving through Washington, D.C., the several barricades you had to get through to get to the actual parking garage, you could see that the men were demoralized. The men and women in uniform, they felt like they had been betrayed, as you heard that one young soldier say. But as soon as we pulled in downstairs, I believe they started to recognize the vehicle. When we started handing the pizzas out, you saw smiles go from ear to ear. These soldiers, their complete attitude changed, and they knew that they had somebody who was watching out for them, somebody who respected them. And I'll tell you, while I serve in Congress, no soldier will ever sleep on a garage floor. They're welcome to my office anytime.
They might take you up on that. I don't know. Do you have a nice office to sleep in? You have pizza, okay? You have a huge social media following. You may get a bunch of soldiers stopping by your office saying, I need a place to lay down. I have a feeling that probably wouldn't be a problem. What do you think should happen in the future to prevent this kind of a thing? What leadership change? This was obviously a failure in leadership. What needs to happen to change in Congress so that this type of demoralizing event never happens again?
Well, you know what? I think we can look into our country's leadership right now. The three people I named in the beginning of this segment, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden. Benny, they were all born in the 1940s. They've all been in Congress longer than you and I have been alive. So I think term limits is a good place to start. You said that people had whiplash from how quickly I acted. And that's just because I'm a normal American. I'm not corrupted by Washington, D.C. And so when I go to Washington, I see a problem. I want to get it fixed. And there needs to be more patriots like me.
Madison, I want to play a clip for you. This is how Senate Democrats responded to the outrage. Take a listen.
I have told those who run the security of the Capitol that it can never happen again. And I pledge to every National Guard member that it will not happen again.
What do you think of Chuck Schumer's apology, non-apology?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you, all of these Democratic lawmakers sure were eager to line up and take selfies and pictures with the troops. But as soon as they were done with their political theater, they cast them to the side. And don't get me wrong, I believe having the National Guard in D.C. is political theater. I believe they provided an enormous amount of security, more than was needed. I wish those National Guard troops had been in other cities that are being ravaged by groups like Antifa. But I will tell you, when I start thinking about what happened to our soldiers, it makes me really believe that the people who are in charge of our country right now, who are steering us down this path, have absolutely zero respect for our nation and for our nation's soldiers. And these are the men and women who put on bulletproof vests to protect us. And as I said, this was political theater. I believe the Democrats are making Washington, D.C. look like this dystopian police state. So that way, whenever Joe Biden makes any modicum of progress in the country to reopen it, as we know it will, everyone will think that he is doing something really big because Washington's been so shut down. So don't be fooled by these Democratic tactics.
That's right. Security and prosperity for me, but not for thee. I live in Washington, D.C. It was a war zone over the summer. Historic White House buildings were burned to the ground by the mob. Statues ripped down by the mob. The president taken to a secure location. 700 Secret Service police officers and Metropolitan Police wounded by the mobs. And when Trump told the National Guard to go out and protect St. John's Church, he was belittled, screamed at. Military brass had to apologize for it. It's hypocrisy. It's insanity. Many of your colleagues, however, are dealing in this kind of hypocrisy. They built a wall, Madison. They built a wall. You can see it. It's still up to date. It has razor wire on it. What are you going to say to your colleagues who are against Donald Trump's wall, said walls don't work? They said it. And you're going to see them in the hallway. What are you going to say to these people?
Well, you know what? It just shows the hypocrisy that's happening in Washington, D.C. These people, as long as the other party is doing Operation X, they will be against it. This is why I think we need to get rid of the two-party system. Something I think will be extraordinarily difficult, but I believe this new generation of patriots that are coming up might actually stand a chance to make a difference. I'll tell you, it's so funny how Democrats now believe in the Second Amendment, having armed guards around them. They now believe in walls, but they don't want it for normal Americans. I have this to say. Every single American, you see behind me a dining room. I believe in dining room politics. The men and women who put food on the table for their children, I believe they are the elites. I believe they are the royals in our country, and they should be entitled to the same amount of security that these puppets in Washington, D.C. want.
That's right. And, I mean, I'm surprised there aren't 700 pizzas on your dining room table. This seems to be like a Madison Cawthorn special. I want to turn and change the subject for just a moment. Impeachment. Nancy Pelosi is sending impeachment to the Senate next Monday, and it will be read in the Senate next Wednesday. Will Democrats carry this impeachment out on a president who's no longer in office?
Well, I don't know how they'd be able to. It's completely unconstitutional. And if we set the precedent that the Senate is now able to go after political threats when they're private citizens, then let me tell you, you're probably going to get impeached. I know I'm going to get impeached. I have no doubt they're going to try and censure me and bring me on the House floor. But I welcome it. This outrage and this cancel culture that you see it's permeating inside of the establishment on the left is what I think is actually going on in Washington, is that they're coming after people who are changing Washington, D.C. People like myself, Matt Gaetz, Senator Hawley, Senator Cruz. We don't like what we see in Washington. We don't like the swamp. We don't like the cogs. We don't like the gridlock. And we want to actually change it. And so what does the establishment want to do? They want to impeach a private citizen. They want to kick me out of Congress. It's pathetic.
It's pathetic. Congressman Cawthorn, a yes or no question. We have like 10 seconds left. Would you be for a permanent wall around Washington, D.C. to make sure they can't wreck the country any longer?
Absolutely not. That's the people's house. They should be allowed to get inside of their Capitol whenever they want, but not as a violent mob.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us.